Hey, listeners, welcome back to Tales of Abundance. I am Dr. Jon Oberg, joined always by my co-host, Randy Lorensen. Randy, how are you?
Doing great. Doing fantastic, John. How about you?
I am excited about today's topic. I think talking about giving back is something that is going to be a very interesting conversation. And I think there's probably a big part of where we're going that I think we're going. There might be a couple places that shock you.
Yeah. So I think great. I mean, what could tie into abundance more than giving back, right? I mean, a big part of, at least when I think about abundance, and each person can have their own definition, but a big part of it is just having enough. And if you have enough, it means you have enough to give other people and, the cup overflowing, however you want to look at that. But being able to give back is certainly a big, big part of that.
Yep. Agreed. Where do you want to dive in? I think, giving back can mean so many different things. Um, and so I hear it talked about often as time
Mhm.
or talent or treasure. Maybe it's time and talent or treasure.
So I think for me, a lot of it's about having an abundance mindset, right? Versus a scarcity mindset. And we've talked about before, I don't want to belabor the point, but I definitely grew up with a scarcity mindset, and a lot of that was the community and the surroundings and things where that's just the way, maybe I'm projecting that, but at least that was what I took from that community was a lot of a scarcity mindset. And I think, I've become much more spiritual in the last few years between, different things. And, I have in recent weeks here been doing an exercise that is kind of a combination of prayer and meditation. And a big part of that to me is working on that scarcity versus abundance mindset and just thinking about how I believe that whether you call it God, the universe, love, energy, whatever you call it, right? But God has a plan for each of us. And I think part of that is contributing, giving, whether it's, our time or treasure, whatever. And, I think of like this light flowing in from the universe and it flowing out into all these different directions. And so,
That's a big part of it, right? It's like if it doesn't originate from you and you don't feel like you own it, it's real easy to let it go.
yeah.
Hold it loosely, right?
Yeah. And I think that but for me, I've always had thoughts around this, but the more I think about abundance and that there is just so much, it it's flowing through me. And we had a guest, Preston Smiles, when he was on and listening to some of his stuff preparing, talking about abundance blockers, right? And
So
it
good. So good.
it made me think about how I was an abundance blocker. The universe was trying to send all this through me, and I was like, so, my scarcity mindset was definitely like almost like a dam that wasn't fully open and wasn't letting all
Yeah.
the water through.
I was going through a period of my life where I was looking at my own core values. And I was, for me, it was about safety, security. And so part of why I was holding on so tight was that I thought money was the thing that gave me the security. And when I realized that that actually wasn't true for me, like I think that money, there's a reality to money. And when people, are in poverty, then it's very different than when you're not in poverty, certainly. But I was not in poverty at the time, but I still had a scarcity mindset in these words, right? And
Yeah.
and so when I really figured out that the money wasn't the thing that gave me the security I was looking for, it may have given me financial security, but not the other security I was looking for. Like it was so much easier to let go. And so now when I feel that pressure about money being held too tightly, I give it away. I give away more than what's comfortable, and that works for me to kind of. And it's funny; it always flows back faster than I give it.
Let's talk about that. Tell listeners more about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just there's times where I get stressed out about money, not as often as I used to, early 20s or whatever. But when I realize that money's not the goal, it's just a tool, right? And it's not mine. Like I didn't show up on the earth with money. I can't take the money with me when I leave. And so then you just recognize it's just a thing.
Right.
That thing is something to be used like a hammer or a calculator or and
Yeah.
I don't want to I don't want to um belittle the fact that there are people that really truly are in poverty and making it hard, but you know my experience is that people with far less means, in many cases, are far more generous than me, and that's a real sobering thought.
Yeah. Well, I liked what you said earlier about it. Money isn't really ours. It's just something what did you say? We hold at this time, but it flows through us. And, you know, you said it better earlier, but I like that concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do think that there is something psychologically that when I even think of some of my friends that I think of as being really bad with money, but they have this attitude and it's just they always tend to find more, right? And I think, oh, that was kind of wasteful or whatever, but they just have an attitude that, hey, I'll get more money. It'll just come. And there's something really super powerful about that.
There's a huge, I don't know, there's much science behind it, but there's a lot of kind of movement behind this idea of the law of attraction. And I think, there's probably some theological problems with some of it, but I do think that belief systems are a powerful, powerful, I don't know if tool is the right word. They're a powerful force.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's what we're hoping for the listener, right? The listener can choose, a mindset of abundance that resolves with their, other beliefs.
Well, and karma, right? I mean, the whole karma thing is, uh,
As a Christian, that's probably a bigger conversation than that. I think there's some things that I think theologically we'd be at odds with there, but if the idea is that it's not yours and you don't have to hold on to it, I can get behind that.
however you look at it, right? I mean, I don't want to get into that debate. Well, I do kind of want to get into that debate, but I'm going to restrain
Respect.
myself for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
purpose of this podcast. Um, I do think though there is something about when you do good for others, you put it out in the universe, things come back to you in unexpected ways,
That's the
right?
law of attraction, right? I think that is, yeah, I think that's the law of attraction. It summarized. I'm certainly not a law of attraction scholar, but I think that's the idea.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I'm a little more I think of everything, God, the universe as energy more and everything's going out. And when you put this good energy out, it flows and it flows, flows to others and flows back to you. And
Yeah, I think, to whom much is given, much is expected, and the people that can do well with little things are interested in the big things or something along those lines is kind of the way that. And for me, frankly, what it comes back to is like I don't want to hold on to that which isn't mine. Like I want to make sure things are used for good, and whether that's my time, my talent, my treasure. One of my mentors said to me one time, I was talking about donations and giving money and how eventually I wanted to work in it not for profit or whatever. And he's like, why don't you just start now? Like, when do you think they want your time? At the peak of your career or some other time? And I was like, whoa,
yeah,
like that's really powerful. And so, how do you find ways to give more than just your money?
yeah. I mean, that's a big question, right? And, you know, we had I don't want to go too into it, but we had a conversation with a friend not that long ago that was talking about doing that has enough, right? Or has more than enough. And it's like, do we start a foundation and we do start doing all this work now? Or I'm in these peak earning years and I can make all this money, right? And, my thought this doesn't mean it's the right answer for anybody else. My thought is that you can do more, like with that money you can make in those peak earning years, that the ongoing benefit of that is greater than not making that money now. But there's the value of the time, and now you're starting later on the journey.
And I've met people that have chosen to forgo all of their earning years for nonprofit work and things. I think that's also noble in a different way. And so
Yeah,
I don't know that there's an answer. I think people have to kind of figure out their own path as
agreed.
they do that for sure. But
Right.
I do think, finding a way, look, giving back to other people is something that, like in the medical clinic that I run, people who are not clinically depressed, but who are struggling and they don't have clinical depression, we oftentimes help them find volunteer opportunities so they can give back to other and have a bigger reason for being. I remember one woman in particular just really wanted to teach underprivileged kids how to read and didn't know how to engage with that. So we helped her get connected with a local reading program that could do that. And it was such an amazing shift
Yeah.
in that patient. And so amazing.
Let's talk more about that. I like this is a good topic, right? So, I mean, I'm sure there's some science behind this, but when people go help others, whether it's time, energy, whatever, right? Whatever charitable work it is, that, you always hear people say this. I guess when I was younger, I thought a lot of times they were full of shit when they would be like, "Oh, I benefited, I was helping these kids and I learned more from them than they learned from me, or I benefited more than they did." And I don't know, I kind of thought they were just saying it, and maybe some of them are. But as I've grown older, I've realized I don't think they're bullshitting, right? They just figured this out a lot sooner than I did.
Yeah, Alan Graham runs Community First Village and Mobile Loaves and Fishes here in Austin, Texas, for helping the homeless populations, and done a masterful job. And he's really clear, at least he was really clear with me, that like it wasn't about them, it was about them helping me. And when I went and like experienced it and read his book, which is a great book, Welcome Homeless, um, it's like it was such an amazing view. One of the questions I asked him was like, I'm driving down the street, I see a guy panhandling, I don't give him a dollar, $10, $20, whatever it is. Like, I don't want him to like go buy drugs, whatever. He's like, dude, that's like, it's not about you controlling his choices. It's about you letting go of it. And I was just like, oh man. And then the question was, well, do I give it to the guy on the corner or do I give it to an organization? And we talked about the discernment of that process and how you discern through that process. And I think there are some people called to give it to the person on the corner, and there are some people called to give it to the organization. So I don't have like a judgment about which one of those things is right or wrong. What I really appreciate was Alan giving me a different point of view. Like, that and just not hold on so tight to it was my takeaway. And so about any of it, time, talent, or treasure.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I don't know. You seem to always have studies. This isn't your field. This isn't your field. I mean, what generally is the science going to tell us about this? Even though I
I
realize this
really,
isn't your backyard or
look,
whatever.
I think anytime we can give to other people, and it's a recognition of there being something bigger than just ourselves. And the human is a communal animal, and so I think there's got to be science that points to that just says it's healthy for us to be engaged and involved in a community. And the sociology, if you go back 20,000 years before there was money and the way we look at money today, everyone played their role.
Yeah.
And there are some pretty horrific stories about like 20,000 years ago. If you didn't play your role, you might have been ejected from your village of 150 people. And in some cases, as I understand it, maybe even murdered for not playing your role. So I
Yeah.
think that like, um, yeah, I think that this is not like a last 200 years type of issue. This is a how humans act together in nature.
Yeah, I think what comes to me. I'm so bad with author names, but I believe the book is called Tribes, Unger, maybe. Um,
Sebastian Younger wrote the work. Yeah, Tribe.
yes.
Yeah.
And I think about
Tribe.
I've listened to him. I haven't read the book, but I've listened to him on a few interviews. And he talks about soldiers that are in the foxhole together and they're in these horrific situations. And there's no suicide when they're, over fighting this war because they're taking care of their brothers, right? But then they come home and there's all of these, they don't feel like they're contributing, and there's that. Or I believe there was something in there about like when Nazi Germany was bombing the crap out of London, and these people are living underground with rats and no food, and but all like again, no suicide. Nobody would give up when they were in the worst of conditions because they all depended on each other and they all relied on each other. And I think, they were literally happier. Some of them missed that when they went back to their so-called normal lives, that they really did go into depression and had suicide and things when people were no longer
Yeah,
relying on them.
it was the guy to your left and the guy to your right,
Yeah.
right? They talk about that a lot, and the level of commitment, and yeah, absolutely, and the community, right? It gets bred into you. I was speaking to some military officers years ago, doing some training for them about leadership, and we were talking about in one part of the conversation the difference between uh, you know when bullets are flying and you give an order. It's different than when you're in the motor pool, not on the front lines. There's a different set of motivations and being aware of the psychology behind that. I think that's probably not a whole lot to do with giving,
Yeah.
but it's interesting, just the psyche. of how we interact as a community. And the book by Younger is called Tribe, by the way. That might be the book that also talks about the 150 person tribes and how they ejected people.
Yeah, it might be. Um, it makes me wonder. You're going to hate this because it's pure speculation, but Dr. John's going to hate this. But it makes me wonder if like nurses, for example, and people that, even teachers and people that are doing things to help, I'm betting have lower levels of depression and I'm not saying there's not depression and suicide amongst nurses or whatever, but I would be curious if there's a lower level than there is in a lot of other parts of society with people that don't feel they're contributing to others as much.
Yeah, I mean, dentists, of course, are kind of known to have high suicide rates, so I don't know how that plays into that theory. And by the way, I don't think speculation is bad at all. It's one of the first steps in science, right? You have to speculate before you can get to a hypothesis. So,
Okay.
yeah,
So
I
my
think
takeaway from that is that dentists think that they're a drain on society and we don't need their teeth, and I should just cancel all my future dentist appointments. That's my takeaway from
Yeah, it's not a very good take because the science behind that is that oral health leads to longevity, and there's a lot of background. That's like saying that sanitation isn't important either, because I don't want to take the trash out.
that. Stop facting me. I'm just telling you my takeaway. All right.
Cool, cool. Well,
All right.
note to self: carry breath mints into the studio next time.
There we go. All right. Um,
That'll be one of my forms of giving.
yeah. So anything else? Just I don't know, the science. I mean, again, we're kind of shouldn't, this isn't your area, but anything we want to add there before we move on? Generosity, fulfillment.
I just think broadly speaking that giving is good for people. And so finding a way to give back, it ties into some other episodes upcoming about, isolation and upcoming about friendship. And so we're going to be talking about those things. And so giving is a great way to actually meet people if you're giving your time, if you're giving your talent. You can give specific talents if you're good in an area and an organization needs that, but you can also give just your time, but just show
Yes.
up and play a role and allow yourself to be directed can be a really wonderful way to give back if you don't have, financial resources. And then, financial resources, it's great to give to organizations as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's and I think it aligns with living on mission, right? And something you and I have had conversations about, but living on purpose, living on mission, whatever you want to call it, I think that almost always, I don't want to say always, but almost always it's going to involve some type of giving. So what are the different types of giving? I think the first one people think about is financial, right? And it
Yeah.
could be even going back to the robber barons, Carnegie and Rockefeller and these people made all this money, and at the end of the career they gave it all, or not, well, they didn't give it all away, but they gave a lot away and did a lot of things, and we think about that. But what are the different ways people give? So it could be financial, it could be whatever. What else?
Yeah, I think in financial giving can be more than just giving dollars. There's in-kind giving where you can give services or, investments or real estate. There's all types of financial giving available. And so I think that's it's the easiest, simplest thing to in terms of understanding what giving is. I think time, you can give time two ways. You can give time in terms of your talent, where you're giving an actual skill set someone needs. If you're a CPA and an organization needs some help with something, that would be one way to give. A different way to give would be just to show up and let someone direct you. Like one of the things we used to do with our kids when they were young is take them down to the green belt and clean up trash. And that's not a particular talent. It's just, grab a trash bag and let's go clean up a place that we enjoy and let's be good stewards of that space. And so that would be, another way of giving. I think there's other ways too. I think that, it's good to be generous with people in general. And you can show up and be giving in terms of your time and your talent and your treasure in a not-for-profit situation, but you can more broadly just be kind, right? Just an abundant, like kindness generally doesn't cost anything. And
Yeah.
so I think if there were more kindness in the world, we would all appreciate that, and then I think, some people struggle with, well, how do I give to a good organization? Like one of my things, I teach managing large organizations inside a school of social work. And so I teach classes on how do you run large government institutions and how do you run, good institutions that benefit social good and nonprofits and all this stuff. One of the things that I would say is people are too quick to start a brand new nonprofit where there's already a ton of nonprofits in the space. And all you're doing is adding administrative overhead to that particular mission. So I wish that people would like try to align to an existing set of missions that was already doing well and administering it well rather than trying to start it up new and different I'm not trying to like dissuade innovation. I think innovation is really important, but I do wish there's a little bit more alignment toward those things.
Yeah, I've had something I've been thinking. I mean, you brought this up. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but it's something I've been thinking about for years and how to go about it, and even did some work on it a few years ago after I'd visited El Salvador and found out what I really wanted. My first instinct how to do it. The U.S. government made it just financially unfeasible because of permitting and bureaucracy and crap. But I've since, I think, figured out better ways to do it. And I was bringing us up with a friend a few days ago, and he's like, "Oh, I'm creating this nonprofit. And so you don't have to do it. We could run it through there." And I'm like, "Oh, that's brilliant because I don't want to do that crap anyway."
Yeah.
Right. And
But
so,
I think we have to also be careful that we don't like just jump into a situation and not. I'll give you a great example of a bad way to do it. I was a master's student and I wanted to go down to a local middle school that was in a really impoverished area and start a scholarship fund for college for these kids. And so I scheduled a 30-minute meeting with the principal and a discovery call. And I basically walked in and said, here's what we want to do. And I was all high and mighty. We're going to have this scholarship fund for these kids that have no money. And for the next 4.5 hours, he walked me around and like introduced me to all the students by name and explained to me the heritage of the problem was not just about the money, but about some of the cultural things that were going on. And he really educated me on a subcultural issue that I had no exposure to. Was you know he didn't make me feel like I was being arrogant walking into the school that day. But if we're being really honest, there was a level of like naivete and arrogance that I could solve a problem that I didn't fully understand. And it was my first kind of foray into like, you need much more curiosity. Like, you need to really understand, what you think the problem is, and it may not even be a problem.
yeah, so you mentioned Alan, and I think Alan has, Alan Graham, he has a fantastic understanding, like a really, really deep understanding of the homeless problem. But, my first, I haven't, I don't think I've ever told you this story. I'm pretty sure I've never told it on the podcast. But when I was a freshman in college at the University of Minnesota, I was in a writing class and we had to do a group project on a group of people. And for whatever reason, our little group of, us four 18-year-olds, or I might even been 17 at the time, decided we were going to do it on the homeless people of Minneapolis. We
Yeah.
walked downtown Minneapolis to a soup kitchen, and our plan was we were going to volunteer. We get to this church, the doors are locked, we can't get in, we're too early, I think, or something like that. And we just so happened to meet this guy, and I've thought about this guy numerous times in my life. This guy was so fascinating. He was like, we're all, little 17, 18-year-old white kids, and he's this big, kind of strong, gruff-looking black guy that it was, honestly, it was a little bit intimidating, and he was super aggressive, kind of the way he approached us. But then he had a charm, and he's like, and we somehow told him what we were doing, and he goes, "Oh, you want to learn about the homeless? Come with me." So here are the four of us. This guy is leading us around downtown Minneapolis. I asked this guy questions for hours. Like I could have stayed there all day. And he just, he was funny and he was almost like he was playing to the cameras, even though there was no cameras. But man, it was an education. And he was just talking about how, like, his background. He was a Vietnam vet, had had some problems. The gist of the story, he got married, everything was going great. His wife worked for the USA Today. He was some kind of engineer with multiple degrees, if I remember right, from Oklahoma State, maybe Oklahoma. And one day he walked into the USA Today headquarters with a gun and started threatening people. And then he'd been homeless ever since. And this guy would talk about, well, I wrote this article that was in Reader's Digest. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's bullshit. right? I just, how is this homeless guy? But this guy was smart. So I went back to one of the few times I went to the library in my college career, to be honest, was like to research and basically trying to find out. I'm thinking, I'm fact checking this guy, right? And I found the article. It was like an article on train hopping. And then he talked about some other thing he wrote. And there were three, four articles. And I'm like, oh, he's like, and it was him. And it was just, he talked about how things really were. And I won't go through the whole thing because I could talk about, this could be a whole episode in itself. But, it was the crabs in the barrel mentality, right? That he would talk about how if somebody did go get a job, and they would then get a car. They'd go from living on the street to they'd buy a car and be sleeping in the car. The other homeless people would like destroy their car, right? Or they wouldn't let them out. And he talked about how people didn't really want to be helped, most of them. And so that goes back to what you were saying is, figuring out how you can help or where you can
Yeah,
meet
that
them.
was a part of Alan's story is that Alan really, Alan Graham with Community First, really, he really became a part of the community. And I think that most communities, they don't want someone to come in and like fix them like they're broken.
Yeah.
It's like they want someone to come in and understand them. And then if there's a way that there can be um, you know, help just seems paternalistic. I don't think it's the right word, but if there's opportunity at that point, it can be discovered, and I think that there's, you know, I don't know. I you just described so much of the learning that needs to happen, I think, and I found that there are so many opportunities. It's only become more clear to me as I get older how much less I know. It's like there's homelessness is one of the, big grand challenges in social work, but there's 13 of them.
Yeah.
There's 13 grand challenges in social work. And so it's like, how do you, um, and every one of them has, it's seemingly intractable problems.
Well, but it's so easy on the outside to think, well, just go do this, right? Go get a job. But you never consider that if they go get a job and they do something with it, the other people tear them, that it's
Get
counterproductive.
how about to get a job, you need to have identification, and getting paperwork
Right.
for yourself is darn near impossible. Like it's such a tangled web. And so I think when it comes to giving back, we talked about ways you can give back, but I think one of the things as we're talking through it that I would encourage for maybe me more than anybody and the listeners too, but would be like we have to be curious, right? We have to be
Yeah.
curious about what's necessary and not come with pre-prescribed solutions based on, whatever we think we know. I just know that every time I dive into one of these grand challenges, I learn more and more and more. And I will say I have the benefit of having a network of people that are experts in some of these things, and going and talking to them is so enlightening. Like it's such a, you know, it, and it's for me, it's easy for me to show up with a beginner's mind because I know how little I know.
Yeah.
So
Right. So I mean, I guess in summary, I mean, we just, we've been talking about emotional generosity and understanding curiosity, grace, etc. Financial giving. So if somebody's got a lot of money, you can do more good, right? It's hard to help a billion people unless you have a lot of money. But if people don't have that, they have time, and we also need people to go
I
down
mean,
and just volunteer.
Mother Teresa didn't have a whole lot of money,
Right,
and she's impacted the world. I think there's a lot of people that don't have
right.
money. I think it's about just finding whatever it is that is your calling. And I don't. I mean, look, helping a billion people, that's something that's been on my heart for a long time. But I think there's a lot of people who their calling is to have a great family and to create abundance in their family. And so I don't think there's any number that makes it like
Yeah.
more important than another.
No, look, it could be coaching, right? Somebody could go coach. They could volunteer at the school. I mean, there's any number of things. There's a lot of ways people could approach this, right? I will tell you, one of the things that I have put quite a bit of thought into over the last several years is making it sustainable. And I see so much charity that people give, and it's wonderful. And God bless them, like they're giving this, but it gets spent, and then it's just they have to keep feeding it. And I love the model. There was a guy that I heard that I don't remember his name. I should have researched this better before the show, but he's a kid from Sweden, Norway, Finland, one of the Nordic countries who got really concerned about the garbage patch of plastic in the Pacific, right? The one that I think is the size of Texas. Probably have to fact check that if it's actually that damn big. But he built a barge that was solar powered to go out there and clean up the plastic. And he raised, I think it was a few $1 million, a bunch of it from Silicon Valley. But what he did, I think, is genius. He created this barge and then he took the plastic and he started recycling it and selling sunglasses and water bottles. And I don't even know all the products, but you can go buy all of these products. Well, he has made the business, he's made this charity sustainable, so he doesn't have to raise money anymore. And then he's able to take those proceeds as he sells them to create another barge and another barge so that this thing can keep working, out there and just keep cleaning up this garbage patch. And I love that idea, right? I love the idea of being able to create something that can pay for itself and keep going for
And I
years
think
in
for
the future.
situations where that's possible, it's great. But his kid's name is Boyan Slat. I say kid, he's 20 years old. He's Dutch.
Yeah.
And just looked up, I used Google
Okay.
real quick. But yeah, it's a great story. And I think there are companies that you can do that create great nonprofits or even great social good for profits. And there's also some places where, you know, profits just not be part of the motive at all, and that's okay too.
Yeah. Right. And like again, I mention Bitcoin all the time, and I think in that, but one of the ways there's so much charity that's been done indirectly. Like, millions of people now have energy in Africa that there was never a financial incentive, and nobody was going to build these expensive power plants to they would if the finances to just real simple oversimplification. You build a power plant, you spend millions of dollars on it, and then you're trying to sell power for 50 cents a kilowatt hour,
Yeah,
which the poor people in the villages can't afford.
yeah.
There's no way to financially make this work, right? And to bring power. And so because they can build these power plants and use them to mine Bitcoin and dry some things and use them also with agricultural, with some of the heat and whatever, um, they then can also provide power to these villages that have never had power. And that's a pretty amazing thing to me because now you have, people that kids can study at night and all the different things that electricity opens up. I mean,
Yeah, I think research and innovation is one place where you might have some like the government step in and do some basic research, and we could have a whole conversation around basic versus applied research and how the government's role and all of that.
yeah,
But I think at the end of the day, like go back to giving back, right? I think that, some people are going to be called to give to organizations that are sustainable. Some people are going to be called to get like one of the things that's important to me is that I'm not giving back in a way that necessarily impacts my businesses. I don't want that to be a thing. Like I want to give and I want it to be a gift with no strings attached.
okay. So you're saying you don't want that as you don't want to use it as a marketing tool. Is that what you're saying?
Look, if there's a way that I should give back as a marketing tool, then I want to look at that as a marketing tool and just call it what it is. And I don't want that to check my box for giving.
Right. Okay. Love
You
it.
know, I just again, is that important to everyone? No, of course not. But that's one way that I view it, so that I really feel like I'm giving a gift with no strings attached. I think a gift with a string attached is not a gift.
Let's move to excuses, right? Because I know I've been guilty of having excuses in the past, like, well, I'm still trying to build up my treasure and, I don't have enough and, or I'm so busy, I don't have time, right? I mean, there's a lot of these things. So what would you tell people that are experiencing that or thinking that or feeling that?
Yeah, I mean, a guy that mentored me one time, I was talking about my values, and I said, let me tell you about what I value. He's like, well, I don't need you to tell me. I was like, what? He's like, let me just see your checkbook and your calendar. I was like, I didn't like the answer at all.
Yeah.
And so if it's a priority, then you put it in your checkbook and you put it in your calendar. A checkbook,
Right.
listeners, that's something us old people used to carry that had like these pieces of paper we'd exchange for money, and then we'd keep a register of how much money was on our account. Um, bank statement. Show me your bank statement in your
Yeah.
in your calendar for you listeners that are not dinosaurs like me and Randy.
Yeah, that's great, right? So, I think the big thing is that if you don't have the money, fine, you have time, right? And I think early in life, you have more time than money. Later in life, hopefully you have more money than time.
Yeah, maybe.
That's the plan.
And so maybe we just think through like, give a little, you
Yeah.
know. But again, if you don't, then give your time. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
Well, and it's look, even a smile. We probably, you talked about just being nice, but sometimes just a smile or just making somebody laugh
Yeah.
might,
One good deed a day, right? One
yeah,
good
that
deed
pays forward and they make the next person smile or, whatever, right?
a
So
day. That's great. I love it.
that if people can start there, a smile costs nothing.
Well, and the last we have some notes going to the show about the topics um, that about how does this help you to grow, and I think that giving back does lead to growth. Again, for me, it's not my so that, right? It's
It's
not
not
my
your what? Say that again.
it's not my so that. I don't do it so that I
Right.
grow. It is true that I've made relationships personally and professionally in these nonprofit arenas. That's true. It's true that I'm part of nonprofit groups for my professional career. That is true. So no judgment about that. It's also true that you can learn leadership skills, uh, you know, by going through and becoming a board member. There are some nonprofits that have great like board development programs and officer development programs and really really wonderful. Um, anyway, so I don't think it's bad to link the two together, but for me, I want to be cautious that I'm not always just being selfish in that. So I try to make sure that I'm also giving. And by the way, that's my own set of problems I'm working through because there was that, times in my life where I've been so transactional. So that's how I check myself.
Yeah. I think it's just good for the soul, right? You're so I hadn't even really thought about the leadership skills and the networking and all that. You know, that stuff's fantastic, but I also just think it's good for the soul. So, what would you tell somebody that's starting out? So we probably got people, we got some people that are well on the way. Let's take a new person that's never donated. What would you or spent their, whether it's time or money or whatever. How would you tell them to get started?
I'd say if there's a place that, if you go to church and that's the place you want to support, that's an easy one. If you're not sure about an organization, check out Charity Navigator or GuideStar to see how they're rated as a charity. There are kind of big national charities that are easy to give to if you believe in what they do. Like, the National Red Cross would be, I think, one that's not super controversial for most people. It probably is somewhere I don't know about. We're probably gonna get all kinds of mail about that now. But and I don't donate to the American Red Cross specifically, but I think, so find the things that are maybe important to you where you want to give, and then give what you can in terms of your time, talent, or treasure. And I think it starts at home for a lot of people. And so you can start right in your own community is a great place to do it. It's great.
Yeah, do something, right? Like I said, start with a smile. Maybe it's go coach a
It
kids team or donate your time. Start somewhere.
doesn't have to be organized, man. Remember, I used to just grab trash bags and my kids and, maybe some gloves and we
Yeah,
just go clean up the park that we play at.
yeah,
It doesn't have to be grand.
yeah. Just yeah, and find something that I think that's meaningful to you, that you care about, right? Yeah.
Never
So
walk past a piece of trash with, the kids. Like just
so I love it. I think that's great. And I think we could talk about, people later in life, like starting foundations and doing that, but I think starting with just where to start is a good thing and just go from there and grow from there.
I'll say if you're in that place, check out donor advised funds is a really cool way to start a family foundation if you're getting started with it. If you don't have the money for a full-on family office, a donor advised fund, you can talk to your financial advisor about that or shoot us a text message or a phone call or an email and Randy and I can tell you who we talk to about these things. But yeah, good stuff, Randy.
Cool. Um, again, my call to action to people, I think, is just do something. Start small, take the little step, get into it. I don't think you'll regret it. If you do, go to the website, yell at me, send me an email, tell me I'm stupid and you hated it or whatever. That's fine. Again, feedback is great, but check out the website, talesofabundance.com, for tools and other things on there. Download, please. Look, listeners, you guys are our lifeblood, so download. Give us feedback, give us 5 stars, tell your friends, tell your family,
Tell
whatever
us
it
what you
is.
like. If there's topics you like, topics you don't like, topics you want to hear about, let us know. All
Oh, love that. Yes, we should say that more often. That's great.
right,
So
thanks, Randy.
thanks, John.